play is absolutely necessary for us as adults who want to live extraordinary lives. Good day, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Create, Play, Live podcast. I am your host, Nanette Saylor, and today we are in for a treat. My guest today is Betsy Rosam. She has a beautiful story to tell of her evolution as a creative being. She currently is a practicing artist, and she'll share with you a little bit about how she has recently claimed that as her part of her identity. She's a #1 best-selling author. She's a certified speaker. She is an EFT practitioner, an advanced Psych-K facilitator, and I bet some of you don't know what Psych-K is. She's a Reiki practitioner and an expert energy psychology counselor. She has a master's in mental health counseling and a BS in vocational home economics education. And like many of my guests, she has worn many hats in her life. And I just love that what I get to do in this series is have these wonderful conversations with women who have explored their own creative essence in a variety of ways. So welcome to the Create, Play, Live podcast, Betsy. I am so glad you are here to share with us.
Thank you, Nanette.
You are so welcome.
Today. I'm really excited about our talk.
Me too.
I love to talk about creativity. I just love to.
Yeah, me too. So let's start at the beginning for you. You and I were just having an interesting conversation about an experience you had as a little girl that really anchored the early trajectory of your vocational life, your work life. Can you share with our audience how you felt as a little girl, as a creator, and how that informed where you ended up early in your life?
Well, as a little girl, I used to love to color. And, we had coloring books where you colored. I was meticulously colored in all the lines. And then I remember as I got a little older, I took an art class during the summer. And we did sculpting and, all kinds of fun stuff. But I was told that because I couldn't draw, my drawings were not art worthy. And because of that, I was told I wasn't an artist. And so at 10, I learned how to sew. And so sewing became a passion of mine, which brought me to becoming a home economics teacher. And even back then, I wanted to be a fashion designer. And, this was back in the early 70s. And I was told that, well, you would have to live in New York City. And fashion designers typically don't have children and families. And you need to decide what you want to do most. And at the time, I wanted mostly to have a family. So I kind of let go of that idea and decided I would major in home economics and teach cooking, which is very creative, and sewing and family relationships and all that yummy stuff. And I really thoroughly enjoyed the 20 years that I did that. And I remember at one time when I was making my daughter's prom dresses, I remember telling somebody this story and they said, well, you are a fashion designer. Look what you make, And I went, yeah, I am. I just don't get paid for it.
Yeah, isn't that interesting how I know that you're not alone in this awareness that it took somebody else to point out that you were designing fashion by making beautiful dresses for your daughters for their proms. Do you have pictures of those still?
I do. I might have. I know that with my oldest daughter, it was so funny because she was in theater and she really didn't have a prom because they had prom the same night as they had their theater award ceremony. She wanted an award ceremony dress instead. And we had been to New York City and been in some of the shops and saw some really inspirational stuff. So I made her this. It was a short off-white chiffon dress, umpire waist, and Steph was kind of flat chested at the time. I think she still is. So I took apart these lovely silk flowers and put silk flowers all over the front of the top and put crystals in the center of each one. So she had all these, and they were mostly, she's dark Italian like her dad, and they were mostly peaches and brick colors and yellows and almost like fall colors. And it was absolutely gorgeous, but I don't think I have a picture. And we had so much fun doing it.
It sounds absolutely magical. Yeah, it's funny, as you were talking, I was reminded too that when I was in middle school, I did a lot of sewing. I did a lot of sewing with jeans fabric, and I made jeans bags and jeans hats and long skirts and embroidered and did all that crazy stuff. And of course, now it's all the rage again. And I don't think I have a single picture of any of those things that I've made, which is too bad. But it's fun to at least have the memory, isn't it?
It is. And what's really interesting is she was involved in theater, so I got to make a lot of costumes. And today she has her own business doing birthday parties and events in New York City, and she does stilts, and she makes and designs her own costumes because of the skills that I shared with her and the inspirations. And I'll tell you, I think she's better than I am.
Oh, there you go. Well, and it's interesting too that the concept, the idea of legacy keeps coming up in these conversations too. And isn't it a beautiful thing that we're able to pass those skills on to our children when and if they're willing to watch and to listen? And sometimes I know what's happened for me and for others that I know is that we don't even realize that our children are picking these things up. Right? It's just later in life, it shows up in this unusual way.
Yeah.
So I also think it's fun that, and no accident, that my circles of connections include people who have similar interests and backgrounds. I too created costumes in high school. I too was a theater kid. I too didn't go to prom because we just didn't go to prom. We had an anti-prom party, the theater kids. So it's fun how that all circles around. So then you shared with us 20 years in teaching home ec, back in the days when home ec was home ec and when actually schools had home ec. But in the background at that particular time, you were doing some creative things in terms of supporting your children and your family, but you weren't really identifying yourself as creative at that time, were you?
No, I wasn't. My first husband didn't like the, quote, mess around creating. And fortunately, he was a pilot and gone half the time. So I would actually plan these little creative events around the time that he was gone so that I could teach my kids to sew. I could teach my kids to cook. And I have a wonderful memory of my son. At the time he was 10 and we were in the grocery store and he saw Cornish hens and he was like, "Oh, Mom, I want to make these." Then we had this lovely mother and son day of cooking Cornish hens, and a lot of creative things, marshmallow fights, moving the furniture around so we could have a place to hide behind. My children, unbeknownst to me, because of their creativity that I inspired, and I'm hoping it was me that inspired it, every Halloween when they got a little older, they wanted to have a haunted house, and I did absolutely nothing. They got into my fabric stash and enlisted neighborhood kids, and we had a haunted house. I think one year, the only thing they asked me for was to drive them to a place to get dry ice. It was extreme. I mean, it was like the place in the neighborhood to go on Halloween because our house was the haunted house. And my kids did it all, and it was so cool to watch. Yeah, it was neat. So a lot of really good memories around sharing creativity. And all three of my children are musicians. My son started writing music at the age of 12. My daughter choreographs aerial silks in New York City in tap classes. So that permission to be creative that I instilled, because their father wasn't. He had a block to it, but I was able to do that and feel pretty good about that.
Yeah. And I think, what I love about that story is that you found a way in the space, in the time when he wasn't around to be angry about a mess. You found a way to make it be possible that you could engage you and your children in these activities. So now let's fast forward, because we have to talk about your creative space that you have created in your new home, because I've had the privilege of being in it and enjoying creating with you in it. Share with our listeners what it was like to be able to make this space for yourself and how you're using it now.
Well, thank you so much. It's my favorite place. Yeah, when my husband and I went to Disney for their Epcot's Flower Garden series one year, Stephen St. Ange from TLC's Trading Spaces, I think he's from Trading Spaces, was there. And I brought a sketchbook and asked him about a craft room, designing a craft room. And he shared with me what he had done with, it was just a brief little sketch of what he had done for Rosie O'Donnell's craft room. And I was so excited. Went home and my husband and I checked out some kitchen cabinets from Lowe's and some file cabinets from IKEA, and we made a plan. And I set up a beautiful craft studio with sewing machines, rubber stamps, paper, paint, beads. And then when we moved, we sold that house 6 years later and moved, and I put everything into storage because we were fixing up a house that had been torn apart by renters. We sold that and we moved into our present home. The room was a little bit smaller, so we had to look at the design and change things a little bit, but I knew I wanted some similarities. And so I released a couple of cabinets and bought some more of the IKEA bottom cabinets. And I have an island in the middle, and I can seat probably 3 people without too much trouble. It's a little tighter than my last one.
When you and I created together, there were 3 of us. There was plenty of space. We had a delightful time. I think I'm so interested in the idea that you went to see someone present just, at a home show kind of event, right? Mm-hmm. And just walked right up to them and said, "Hey, could you give me some ideas?" Mm-hmm. I think it's interesting always for me to hear those stories, because how many of us have sat in the audience thinking to ourselves, wouldn't it be nice if I could get somebody like this to offer some support? And yet we don't muster up the courage to step forward and ask. And you did. And it began this process of you creating this really wonderful space.
Thank you. Yeah, I learned a long time ago that I can always ask for help. And the worst thing that can happen is they say no. And because I've asked for what I wanted, I usually get it.
Yes.
Very few times.
Isn't that an interesting concept, right?
Yeah. And you know what? It's really, what I found very profound, especially for us women, that we don't always ask for that. For whatever reason, we're too busy. We think we can do it all ourselves. For the longest time, and because of my training in home economics, I thought I was the only one that could do it the right way. Yes. And my maiden name was Wright to boot. So there you go. And then I realized it doesn't matter whether it's done my way, that there's so many more opportunities out there if we just let go and just ask for what we want. Magical stuff happens.
Yes. Yeah. Your room is really proof of that. So that's an interesting segue into your work with Psych-K and tapping, and because my awareness around those things are that they support us in this space of letting go. And I think that I know in my awareness that many women are often in that place of feeling tied to perfectionism in some shape or form, tied to what should be or what we need to do, not necessarily what we want or we desire in our lives. And so the work that you do, share with us how it is that these tools become support for women like you and me who continue, quite frankly, to be in the space of needing to be reminded and needing to be supported to let go of the things that don't serve us.
Well, it's really interesting because there's a huge link between creativity and self-talk. um,
Yes.
and I remember years ago, I've taken the Artist's Way twice. And if you have taken the Artist's Way, and I think Nanette teaches it, in the Artist's Way, it talks a lot about the self-talk from our childhood and the things that we've learned. And it's basically the first 7 to 10 years, our brain records thoughts or even perceptions from situations that we think about ourselves. And they're really strong, and they run our subconscious, and our subconscious is in charge 95% of the time through habit. And our conscious, which is what we think, is only in charge 5% of the time. And so we go around with these, well, I'm not really an artist, or I'm not good enough, or, or we compare our results in creativity to others and don't really do more. And so what I do is with the processes that I know and understand, I guide my clients towards changing those neural pathways of the brain with those beliefs. And we release the old beliefs that don't work, and we input new beliefs that do work towards success. And I've used these tools. When I started with these tools, I went to someone that understood them and used them for my limiting beliefs, and have released a lot of those limitations. And the word play, we switch out the word perfectionism for play. And I remember I had a business coach that said, Betsy, you're get ready, get set, get ready, get set, get ready, get set. When are you going to go? And that's what perfectionism for me is. I can't do it unless it's perfect. And I have a really interesting story I'd like to share about a class I was taking on letting go and letting God. And we were in this room, and the teacher says, "Oh, we're going to draw mandalas." I think that's how it's pronounced. And loving the idea of colors and everything, I'm drawing my mandala, and it's all done, and we're all done. And she looks at us and she says, "Now I want you to tear it up." And everybody was like, "Ah!" And as I was tearing the pieces up, they were falling on the table in this lovely, lovely positioning. And I looked and I said, "This is prettier than what I could have done myself." And it was a huge lesson in for me to let go and let God, that I do the footwork and then I let go of the results, and magical things happen. And to take it even further, I was teaching a Sunday school class, and that was the topic. And I didn't like what the curriculum activities were. So I decided to do this with my students, my kids. And they were like 8 to 10, and they were all drawing their little mandalas. And I had given them a piece of paper with a circle on it so they could, drop up and rearrange them. And as I was giving directions and telling them to tear them up and glue them down again as they fell, one little boy raised his hand. He says, "I have a better idea. Let's take all of our pieces and make this big one on the wall so the aliens can find us." And so I did that. We put all of our pieces on the big circle on the wall, and unbeknownst to me, someone took a picture of it. And I took out the picture and I tweaked it. And it is the cover of my first book, Parenting Affirmations.
So isn't that magical? Yeah.
And I was looking for a cover, and I did, it was like putting out and setting the intention. I don't know what I'm going to use for a cover for this book. And it's just a huge lesson in play and being open.
Yeah. Yes. And that curiosity and allowing, how many teachers would have said, or how many parents would have said to that little boy, "No, no, no, there is no such thing as aliens, and we're going to do it the way we set out to do it originally." Instead, what you did was to go with the flow, allow your curiosity to lead, let it just evolve as it wanted to evolve, and look at the magic that was created. How perfect and beautiful that is.
Thank you.
Yeah. So tell us about your books, because now you have 2 at least, right? Or maybe even a third.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have 2. I have 2 books. One is 30-Day Journey to Family Peace and Harmony, Parenting Affirmations and Actions. And that one's not on Amazon. That one, I think I have it on my website available, and I can get you a copy. There's a CD of meditations that go with the affirmations and some tapping instructions. And then the second one is an Amazon #1 bestseller called Making More Than Lemonade Out of Lemons. And it is inspiring stories of mine, lessons I've learned. And at the end of each chapter are some journal questions. So it's a perfect journal book that if you're stuck and you're not sure, well, what do I journal about today? But it also gives you the opportunity to really think about what are some things around those certain topics that you need to be aware of in your own life. That is available in a soft cover, and the Kindle version is only $4.99, and it's hugely valuable because the journaling questions are in meditative form with beautiful music in the background, and you're going to be asked to do stream of consciousness journaling, which is basically getting more in touch with your subconscious and what you really think and what you really feel. And that's where the real change happens. So it's, again, available on Amazon. And I do have a special link where you can get some more bonuses with it if you go through my link.
Beautiful. Well, we'll be posting all of that in the resources in the show notes over on the episodes page. And then also, in fact, those show notes go out to all of the podcasting channels. So for everybody listening, wherever it is that you find this episode, be sure to check out the show notes for resources. I love that you have taken the extra step and added audio with music to those journal prompts, because music is, for me, so important, and I know it is for you. One of the questions that I tend to ask everyone who joins us on this show is to share some of your favorite music. So tell us, Betsy, what's your go-to for uplifting songs?
I like Happy by Pharrell. That's one of mine because I've been considered a very happy person most of my life or recently, and had a huge challenge in the last year and a half. I wasn't sure if I was going to get my happy back, and that song really helped me to get there. Another song that I absolutely love is Love Can Build a Bridge, because it's my opinion that the answer to every question we have is love. I had the privilege this last year to have dinner with a group of people that included Don Miguel Ruiz of the Four Agreements, and people would ask him a question and his response is, there's only now and there's only love. And it's like, oh yeah, if we just focused presently right now in a loving state of mind and heart, we could shift a lot of things going on in the world right now.
Yeah, wow, what a beautiful gift. Don Miguel Ruiz from the Four Agreements. Yeah, that's
one of my favorite books. I ascribe to those Four Agreements, and they have helped me I filter my life and my decisions through it, my actions through those Four Agreements. Life's pretty good with those Four Agreements.
Isn't it, I think for all of us to have those kinds of guideposts really makes a difference. And I imagine in the work that you do with EFT and Psych-K, you were talking about how important it is to change our belief systems, right? Because our subconscious is what's forming our habits, to put new messaging back in. So share with us how it is that you help people come to their understanding of what the new messaging is that they need.
Well, it's interesting because we live in a world of duality, and with duality is contrast. And so many times my clients come to me and they know exactly what they don't want. They don't know what they do want. And so we tap out what they don't want, and then we look at what is the opposite of what you don't want. And and we form a belief around that, and we program it in with Psych-K. And what's really interesting is you could do hypnotherapy for, a couple of sessions, but with Psych-K, because it uses something called brain gym and self-hypnosis and kinesiology, that it works within 3 to 5 minutes. You've shifted that belief, and it's usually quick, effective. I've seen lives transformed. I know for me, it's changed a lot in my life. If you knew me 15 years ago, you probably wouldn't see me the same. I was kind of invisible, and that's not who I am today. And so it shifted. I had a belief of not good enough that goes back to my childhood. And so I was able to shift that and be able to accept and love myself completely on the subconscious level. I'd done a lot of work before thinking that I had was able, that I did that, but we tested my subconscious through kinesiology and realized that consciously I believed it, but subconsciously I didn't. And I was doing all these self-sabotaging behaviors, which it's kind of like the self-sabotaging behaviors are where you kind of see yourself to go 2 steps forward and 1 step back, or 1 step forward and 2 steps back. And you're constantly not getting quite where you need to be.
Yeah, and isn't that I know that to be a typical creator's challenge, right? That we don't get finished with the projects that we've started, that we get them 3/4 of the way, but then we don't do it. Or somehow there's something that comes in just, out of the blue and derails it for who knows, whatever reason, right? And we can go on and on with the stories of how as creators, we don't get our stuff to market, right? Or we don't get our creations out into the world for any variety of reasons. The work that you do is so helpful in the world and so necessary. And like you, 20 years ago, if you met me, I was not the person I am today. And, those who have listened to this podcast or have followed me for a while know that I like to claim myself as a recovering stress junkie, because back then, at that time in my life, I was a total stress ball. That was the constant state of being for myself. And reconnecting to my creative energy is what helped me come back to center. So, yeah.
I was a control freak and attempting to be perfect.
Yes.
Of the relationship I was in was not safe not to be perfect. And the family I grew up in expected perfection. And I was so frustrated because I never could quite make it. And I was always reaching. And then when I did this work on, with myself, with another practitioner, I was able to realize that perfectionism is just a block, and again, that let go and let God, that I do the work, and I can't, judging it other than, oh, that was fun to do. And there's also been times that I've made mistakes in my playing with art, and I've put them down and released the frustration or the energy around the negativity around it and went back to play more and have created something that I totally did not expect. And it was even better than what I had thought I wanted.
Yes. Yes. Isn't that fun? And that goes right back to your mandala example, or one of my previous guests, Gail Cohen. We talked about happy accidents in our art. And how, sometimes, and there are examples after example after example of creations that we all know in today's world that were the result of an accident or an oops in an experiment that all of a sudden birthed something new and even better, even greater.
Well, one of my favorite sayings is, and I think I could probably take credit for this quote, is mistakes are only our GPS pointing us in the next right direction.
Yes.
If you look
are our GPS pointing us in the next right direction. That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome. And if you look at all the great inventors, we're course correcting with everything. We're course correcting. Oops, we're correcting course here. We're not quite where we want to be, so we course correct. We course correct throughout our whole life, whether it's relationships or business or art. Just course correct. Oh, a little bit more of this, or a little too much of that. So let's cover it up and do something else. And I love painting because you can always paint over it and start over.
Yeah, and isn't that funny that one of the reasons why I have not painted up until recently is that I just didn't get that. I wasn't okay with the layering. For whatever reason, and I and now I'm at a state in my life where it doesn't really matter why I wasn't okay with it, but I've really come to appreciate that this idea that I could paint over or layer on top of and leave what I didn't like underneath. Somehow I just didn't grasp that concept. And I am so grateful for the work that I've done with a variety of creators who have helped me to see that with paints, all I have to do is just put something else on and keep going until I get to a place where I like it. It really is no different than the collaging that I've always been really comfortable with. But somehow I just couldn't make that transition into the paint world until I sat down to play and allowed myself to do it without being resistant to whatever the outcome might be.
Isn't
And
it
so I'm
wonderful?
really
And
grateful.
I saw something, and I haven't done it yet, but I saw something recently where an artist takes her favorite quote or a prayer or something that means words that mean something unique to her, or sets an intention, and she writes it on the canvas before she begins, and sets an intention with it, and then paints over it. And it's like the energy of those words are in the painting, not that anybody knows, but it's there. And I thought, oh my gosh, how wonderful is that?
Yeah. I have actually done that exercise with a woman by the name of Nadine Hamill. She has a studio now. Her physical studio is on the West Coast. I will definitely connect her in the resource section because she specializes in intuitive painting. And that's one of those kinds of experiences that I was grateful to be led through with her in a class once. And it really is, it's a divine experience, really. Cool. And I now have that painting in my office, hanging in the section of sort of my inspirations. And it speaks to me. It speaks to me. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that and reminding me so that we can share it with everyone who's listening.
I saw on YouTube. YouTube's a great resource for inspiration of oh, gee, I can do that. Where you take an old credit card and you put globs of paint on your canvas and you take the credit card and you just start playing with it. And it came out so cool. And then I stenciled some stuff over it and then added some really cool words. And it's like, oh, this is fun. Yeah.
I love using what I call magical tools that are non-traditional art tools. So as far as I'm concerned, anything you can touch, including your fingers and your toes, are potential tools for using with paint. And it's really, really fun to see what comes out. And what I love about it is somehow when I engage people in the activity with these quote unquote magical tools, they're much more likely to let go of any inhibition about it and much more likely to allow themselves to play without feeling like they have to be a quote unquote artist, right? Because put a formal brush in somebody's hand with a nice formal set of paints, all of a sudden now in our humanness, we go immediately, at least in my head, I go immediately to the place of, oh, now I have to paint like Rembrandt or one of the masters. But if you give me a credit card and some blobs of paint, now I have permission to do it a little differently.
Yeah. And so one of my favorite mediums is beads. I do create beaded jewelry and bead embroidered jewelry, as well as stitches. That one of the stitches is called peyote, freeform peyote. And one of the recent pieces I did was with adding shells with the beads, and it came out absolutely gorgeous. I'll try to download some pictures.
Yes, and hopefully we'll have an opportunity to share some pictures of the things that you create, because when I see them, I am absolutely amazed at how intricate and delicate, and the detail is so impressive to me. I don't know how it's possible for women like you to have the patience and the attention to the fine work that it takes to create these pieces. So I'm looking forward to the opportunity to share those images with our listeners because they're really, really super. It is one of the few disappointments of using podcasting as a medium to share creative energy is that we don't necessarily get to see those creations in the audio form, right? But hopefully we're describing them enough that people's curiosity is piqued and they will follow along in some of the resources to see some of your beautiful creations, because they really are amazing. And what I love about it is that when you possibly imagine the person who created them at one time not calling herself an artist.
Oh.
Seriously.
Yeah.
And I think that that's true for so many of the artists that I know who have evolved into their creative identities later in life, is that when we as outsiders view your work now, it's impossible to think that you wouldn't have considered yourself an artist. And I know that that's true of just about every woman I know who came into their art later in life, that they absolutely did not consider themselves artistic or creative. So it really speaks to my intention for bringing these conversations together, which is to give everyone permission to play with the possibility of seeing what you might create, because it's my belief that we all have that creative spark inside of ourselves. That's what it means to be human, right? It's what it means to be alive. It's up to us to allow it and then to nurture it. And the nurturing it is coming together with other people to have the experiences and to let go, as you've been sharing so beautifully, to let go of all the resistance and the limiting beliefs that tell us that we can't.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, thank you so much for sharing all of that.
Well, one of the other areas that I like to play is when I cook.
Mm-hmm.
It was funny because yesterday my husband says, "So what's for dinner?" And I said, "Oh, something with chicken." And he looks at me and I said, "Well, there's going to be vegetables too. I haven't decided how I'm putting it all together yet." And I was making a big pot of vegetable soup, and I knew I didn't want to put the chicken in the soup because I wanted to have some other options with the big pot of soup when I froze the vegetable soup, some other options for other days. And so I cooked the chicken separately and then add chicken and some spices. And he was like, "Oh, this is cool." And so what I'm going to do is I'm freezing this big pot of vegetable soup, and it's a tomato base with lots of veggies. And, another day I'll probably brown some organic beef and put some Mexican spices in there and make a taco vegetable soup. So, I mean, I play,
Yeah.
And he's, even with leftovers, he's like, "These don't look anything like they were when I got them in the restaurant. You make them look different." I'm like, "Because I play with my food." And as a kid, I was allowed to play with my food.
Yeah. And of course, all of us can remember the day we were told not to play with our food. So it's fun that in this new state of being, you can absolutely take that to the next level. And it's always interesting to me too to identify for people and to emphasize for people that cooking is a creative activity. When people don't claim themselves to be creative, one of the places that I explore with them is, okay, so how is it that you make your meals every day? What is it that you do? And all of a sudden we'll discover that, like you, they're masters of putting something together from nothing with whatever there is in the fridge. And that is the essence of creative activity, right? This idea that we can take a couple of elements, a couple of ingredients, and combine them in ways that we didn't know were possible before.
Mm-hmm.
From our experience, whatever that looks like, and then see what happens. And most of the time when I do that, I can think of only 1 or 2 times when I tried something that didn't turn out as planned, or didn't turn out, actually there was no plan, so didn't turn out as something that we really wanted to eat. Yeah, so it's fun to be able to experiment that way. And
yeah, I think I've had one of those that afterwards I was like, "What was I thinking?"
Yes.
I wasn't.
Well, yeah. And okay, so now we know, and we won't do it that way again. We'll try something else. And I think what happens for me too is I begin to learn the ways to test something too,
Mm-hmm.
and so my process becomes informed by that. One of the things that's an example of that for me is I used to sketch. I still sketch. I sketch a lot, and I like to sketch with marker, and I like to doodle, and I do some words and things on those doodles. And it used to be that I would just kind of dive right in and start writing. And sometimes the words wouldn't quite fit on the page the way I wanted them to, or sometimes they wouldn't quite move around the circle the way I wanted it to, or they didn't look quite the way I wanted them to. And I would get frustrated by that. And in my impulsivity, I would just kind of toss it aside and let it go, because I'd gotten good at letting it go. And then I started to recognize that if I just took a breath and stopped for a minute and experimented on another piece of paper with a couple of ways to do the writing, or to frame the words, or to use a different size, or maybe even a different pen or a different color, and it only would take a couple of moments and doesn't really interrupt the spontaneity. It's just an extra step to see and to try. Then I could lay that on top. And it has really changed the way that I create, to give myself permission to stop for just a minute and to say, yes, I'm going to go with the thought. I'm going to go with that impulse. But let me take a breath and see if I can polish it just a little bit. What if I did this? And let me play with the experiment over on the side first and bring it back. And that was a big lesson for me, because in the beginning, I used to think, well, if I interrupt the flow, I won't get it back, right? I won't get back to this experience. And what I've come to appreciate is that experience, that flow is always there, always able for me to be tapping into it, always available for me to be tapping into it. And that little attention to detail is me honoring it in this new way. So thanks for inviting me into that memory and that space.
You're welcome. This has been wonderful. Thank you.
You are so welcome. It really is a pleasure. I want to take us out with one more question before we wrap up. Often I spend a lot of time, a lot of energy supporting the people that I work with in the idea of visioning and vision boards, and creating pictures in our minds of experiences we'd like to have, and who it is that we want to be, and what we want our lives to look like. And one of the things that I've realized is that the people who are really good at this practice as adults, many of them had imaginary friends as children. So I like to ask my guests that question, and to give you the opportunity to share your experience. And before you do, I will say a full disclosure that I was a child who did not have imaginary friends. I was a child who really didn't play in my imagination much. And so that's why I think now in this stage of my life, I give a lot of attention to how people are connecting to that, because I've had to really explore it in lots of interesting ways. So anyway, share with us your experience with imaginary friends, or any other identity that you think you would like to take on at some point in your life, or maybe have taken on in another life.
I don't have a memory of a imaginary friend. I have had moments where, and this might sound silly, but I'm very attracted to the water and ocean, and I have an affinity for mermaids, and they are. Sometimes wonder if I was a mermaid in a past life.
Yes.
And I'm very attached to the starfish. The starfish, people say, oh, is it because of the starfish? And, that story around the starfish. And it's a wonderful little story about, everybody matters. But that's not the reason. The reason I chose the starfish for my business logo was because the starfish can lose its arm and grow another one. And I really believe that cellularly we have the ability to regenerate. We haven't quite figured it all out yet, but we're in the midst of it, I believe. We are on the verge of learning how to do that. And so that's why, for me, the starfish is a symbol of infinite possibilities. And so that, but as a little girl, I used to love to color and read, and had a tree fort with some other girls in the neighborhood. Yeah, we had in our neighborhood, we had one girl that had all the Trixie Belden and Nancy Drew mystery books, and we would rotate them around, and it was almost competitive who read the last one, who could read the next one first. And it was wonderful, part of my growing up. And my dad had a boat, and we went out, spent a lot of time on the water on the weekends, enjoying that. I had that privilege, and when I think it was 10 or 11, that I had the privilege of actually having a dolphin ride before it was popular to do in the Keys. Many times they'd be out playing in the water when we were out there. So it was really cool.
Yeah. Beautiful, those water images. I too have had the privilege of spending a lot of time on the water and feel that water connection and affinity. And I'm very grateful for being able to activate that on a daily basis now that I live so close.
And one of the things that I enjoy doing as a stress release, besides some of the other tools, is I like to go float. And it's easy for me to float. I don't know if it's subconscious, I've trained myself, but I go to my pool or the beach or whatever, but we do have a community pool that's really easy to access. And I'll just float, do like a floating meditation. I could probably float for hours. And I find it very relaxing to have the sun on my face and just float.
Yeah. That's a beautiful image that you've created for me of myself laying on the water, just floating. I too have the ability to float, and thank you for reminding me I haven't done that in a while. When I get into the ocean on calm days, that's one of my favorite things to do also, just relax there for a while. But as you described, you don't have to do it in the ocean. You can do it in a pool. And actually now, I know we have in our community, I don't know if it's international or if it's around even all of the US, but we now have facilities where you can go float as part of a body process, a healing process. Mm-hmm. And there's one here in town. I'm forgetting the name of it at the moment, but yeah. So for those who are listening who don't have access to a pool, don't have access to the ocean, you may, if this is intriguing to you, you might follow your curiosity to see if there's a float center anywhere near you, because like the salt centers that have appeared in our area in the last few years, because of the medicinal properties of salt, what we're realizing is the weightlessness and the floating really is incredible for stress relief. And yeah, so you might even have one in your neighborhood and you didn't know it. So thank you for triggering that thought. Also, we're all about letting our curiosity lead to extraordinary lives here at the Create, Play, Live podcast. So all of these little kernels, all of these little nuggets that have been dropped today, I hope our listeners will let your curiosity lead you and explore the possibilities of connecting to some of these new things, new experiences, trying some of this, inviting yourself into the world of play in a new way. And yeah, it is what makes our lives interesting and exciting. And certainly for me, it's all about creating more joy so that we can be in the space of contributing to others in a way that brings more joy to them. So as we wrap up, Betsy, do share with our listeners how it is that they can stay connected to you. And
well, yeah. I have a website, betsyrosam.com, BetsyRosam.com. And there's a lot of really good information there. At the bottom of the page, there's a link to my book. There's also a free webinar on how to live harmoniously in the present that I'm going to be doing in June 4th. So you can click there and sign up for that. Plus, I have some other videos available. If just kind of click around on my website, there's a lot of good information, some blog posts, some videos, and a lot of really good information there about what I do. And
you also are on Facebook Live, yes, for
yes,
Motivation Monday?
Mondays I do Motivating Monday on Facebook Live at 1:00 in the afternoon. It was at noon, but I have some appointments. I've had to shift it to 1:00. And it's about 20 minutes to half an hour where I have a topic for discussion. I share some positive affirmations and do a guided meditation. And if you don't make it at 1:00, it's there on my Facebook page, Betsy Rosam. I'm the only one. If you Google Betsy Rosam, it seems to be the only one that comes up. So
yes. Yeah, I'm fortunate that way too. I think I'm the only Nanette Saylor that comes up too. So we can consider ourselves lucky for that.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So that's 1:00 Eastern for those who are listening who might be in other time zones. And what I love about Facebook Live is that those videos stay there. So if you don't catch Betsy Live, which I hope that you'll get the chance to do someday, but if you don't, then you can always go and watch her videos. Her guided meditations are lovely. They're really yummy. So
thank you.
Thank you for sharing all of that. I think, is there anything else you'd like to share before we wrap up for the day?
No, I just want to share appreciation and gratitude for you offering me to this luscious conversation today, to be on this podcast. And along with creativity, gratitude for me is huge. And it's been a blessing to me in my creative process. I'm grateful for the ability to play and enjoy and share creativity. But thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
You are so very welcome. And I too have discovered, uncovered, lived into the awareness that being in a state of gratitude raises my vibration, keeps me out of that stress place, keeps me out of that worry place, keeps me constantly reminded that, yes, there are infinite possibilities in that shape of the starfish and in everything that we do. And it really is why I bring these conversations together, because I am truly grateful for the magical people that have showed up in my life, the luscious conversations we get to have, and the ability to share this with others who may not yet have come into really owning their creative essence so that it does fuel their lives in these really magical ways. So thank you for being here, Betsy. I so appreciate you and appreciate the gifts that you share. I appreciate that we can have this conversation. I look forward to many more. And with that, I will sign off and say thank you and share great appreciation for you, our listeners, and look forward to many more of these conversations to come. Every other Thursday is our schedule for the moment. And as we stay present in the now, we will sign off. Until next time, stay curious, my friends, and do please go out and play today. You are listening to the Create, Play, Live show, where women come together to share how curiosity and creativity lead them to extraordinary lives. I'm your host, Nanette Saylor, and I'm honored to share the mic with some truly amazing women who have asked and answered the question, what if we stop adulting and live every day with the curiosity of a child at play? And these enlightening conversations will invite you to let go of outdated standards, make your own rules, and give yourself permission to play more than ever before. You have the power to create your life. Spend some time with us and you'll learn to see life through new eyes and challenge yourself to new possibilities. We may not solve the world's problems, but we will get you to think differently about your own. Come play with us. Listen and subscribe at createplaylive.com.